Hey, people, it's Sunday. I know a lot of y'all went to church this morning and listened to the minister. And if you understood anything he said, you're either a total genius or he's just an average moron. But I'm going to show you what the word minister means, where it comes from, and several other words here. You can find the word minister in the Hebrew Bible in Psalms 19:12. And minister, they say it means a secret. And it comes from this base word, Nestor. You see it up above here, I think, in line 4. Nestor, meaning hidden, hid, to hide, to conceal, Nestor. So, minister, what? Is from hidden, what? From secret. His job isn't to let you understand it. His job is to conceal it and let you try to figure it out. And from the secret cleanse, that cleanse comes from a catheter in the Greek. To be cleansed, you've been catheterized on me. To catheterize on me. A catheter. A catheter coming from the Greek, the cathum, meaning to thrust into. Not so much as clean, but that's the thing being thrust into you to do whatever it does. And this secret's coming over here from this acryphion, and that's where the word crypt, crypto, all that comes from. Acryph, they say it means secret, hidden. And if you look at this same line in the Latin, it's the occult. It is hidden. Is not meant for you to see. The secret is a misum unto me. Munda is from munda. You heard the joke when you was a kid, some of that from under cheese, from under these nuts, from under. And in the Hebrew it'll say these nuts. And I think that's in a line lower, maybe above, it says that. And it's this word they say means acceptable. But this word here, the minister, tinking, as in making fun of thinking. But tinking is to tinker with, is to tune it up. The minister tinking, to tune it up. And so minister is ancient Egyptian. Men is the erect god of fertility, ancient Egyptian pre-dynastic period. Men's cult was centered around the Coptos. This is actually where the word Egypt comes from, and it's the same American government today, the only place that word's used. You'll see it on the seal of the United States. But the symbol of men was a big old hard-on, a god who fathers himself with his own mother. And a stir comes from the same place a star comes from. Ancient Egyptians used to believe that the creation of a star looked like you were stirring something up, like you're stirring the coffee. A stir. And so minister, the god of fertility, stirs. And so the N is over here. And in minister tinking. So if you look over there at your girl, and she's stirring her coffee with this smile on her face while she's looking at it, and then she looks up at you and gives you this wink, that means she's ready to go back to bed. She's ready to be administered. And that's what this cleansing here is. It's tinking, tinking that spoon on the side of the glass, and in minister, tinking. And you see the line above and the line below. This tinking is so you get the idea of this, and shall be innocent is a winkety. The winky time, a pusher in, and shall be innocent transgressions from the great, the wicked time pusher in. And if you don't believe this about what a minister comes from. You see it in the line above here. It's called a besomer. Besomer mock-in. You know the besom, that's the witch's broom. And it's not for sweeping floors. It's not for flying. You know, it's just a bundle of twigs tied together, and you stir it around the pot before cooking up a new spell, and it removes all the old spirits that might be in there. And you use that motion to stir it around, called the besomer mocking. You know, doing the same as you would your besomer. The besomer mock bearing. The mock and bear in. And a shag, what? You know, the IA reads as a vav, you know, WWT, WUT. And the shag, what? A min, M-I, and read this backwards and forwards. A mini, a little, and V-I-V, a vive, in minister, a tinking. So this is going to be a good one to read. It's only 14 lines, and you'll see that there's several of them that start with 2 words, and then this line they call the passive, but it's actually a impassive. And you'll see it on 14, 13, 9, 6. It's always after 2 words. And 4. And that gives a lot of help in figuring out what that mark means. Not what it means, but when to read it. Like I say, this reads a couple different ways, and I was never sure when to read this. When I was reading with the A words backwards, or when I was reading with the tack, the word after the tack, backwards and forwards. And this tells off, and this says that you read it when you're reading the A words backwards. And it helps add some meaning to this word. You know, this is in a clerics. A clerics, that's the clerical, the officers of the church. The clerics. And in clerics, and then backwards, the share a licking. A licking, it's a come of fix a table. From lamb, you know, the IE reads the A. From lamb, you know, fix the table, and from lamb, we got you some food over here. But a lamb isn't necessarily what you're eating. A lamb is the one for the sacrifice. From the lamb to smash 'em. You know, to smash is the sun, but it's also getting that ass a gangbang. To smash 'em. Everybody smashes the lamb. To smash 'em. You know, this just reads the I, and it's following an S here. The smash 'em and leave 'em. Leavem. And the smash 'em, leave 'em. And when you read it with the mark here, it gives more meaning. You know, in the culture search, you know, the E following the A adds a S in between there. So you're reading the culture, and the S is here, and then EARCH in the culture search. It's a come of fix the table. You know, they all come, the table's set, and from a lamb to smash 'em. And this becomes a EA, and then the E following the A, you put an S in there. EASE. Easel. You know, to make it more easy. The easel of 'em. You know, and to smash 'em, to easel of 'em. But the table isn't so much a table where you set your food, but it's a table that you're tied down to. And the rest of this will explain that. And the Bible's not what you think it is. You know, from the end of heaven is from fix, and fix is in, M-I-M, in. You know, fix is when you're tied to, you're in a fix. And from the fix is in. And in, see, it's come. From the end, from kingdom come, from when the time come, from the end, and from fixes in see it's come. From what's of what cup to, all fix whatum. A tanister. You got an N here, so this one's just reading as an I now. The tanister. Tain is to hold something. And the vav aleph turns into a T. A T-A-I-N. The tanister. From come to. An ister is something that tains you, to retain, tied, fixed. And the next time it comes up here, in R, like a pirate says, R, the fear, and R at of thee, and who hitter. That's what you're fearing, is the hitter. And and ether, and that's what cleans. You use ether to clean something up. And hamid, and hamid is where your word accommodate come from. You'll see hamid in the Hebrew, meaning the columns. It's things that's in your house. And the hamid, it's lad. From sept, the judgments. You're going to take whatever the judge says. From sept. And then, the double I, the first one reading is an E. H, and the I-E reading is an A. Have. From sept, have. And backward, it, a max, M-A-X. The max dick, which do. From sept, from the judgments. From sept, have it, max dick, which do. You don't have a choice. You getting the most you can take. And down here where this besma was, it starts with game. And game is a prefix having to do with biology. Everything having to do with reproduction, starts with that game. It's the game it. Oh, Greek, the game it, the wife. The game it is, the husband. Gamos, the marriage. Connecting the D's. David, the D and D. The game and backwards of fours. The kid-in. KDB, the kid-in of Dickens. I warned you, don't do that. You get that thing hard and, it's going to be the Dickens. Well, ain't he the little Dickens? By them is your servant warned. He's of the Dickenser. And the game, the kid-in of Dickenser. In them bessemer. And so the besom is the broom, but the bessemer is the broom maker. I believe the bessemer, you take a bundle of twigs and you take a string and go around and around, the same as you use it, go around and around and tie it up to make a little broom. You're a bessemer. So when you make your little broom, you have to wrap it around in the right direction, and when you're casting your spell, in order to clean the pot, you have to twist your broom around in the right direction to sweep out the spirits. And I'm sure there's some witches that watch this and leave you the note below and how to do that. The bessemer a mocking, is sticking it in and going around and around. A mock bearing. The shag, what a many vive, the little life in minister. The shag, what the mini vive, the little life in minister. Making babies, tinking, the tuning it up. And the M, following the game here reads as the I, and it's a game-ized. A game-ized them. Eyes them, and And ized is what you got from being gamed. You've been gamed. A gameized 'em. And then backwards, it's a S. A sides my. And a G-E-S. A jizz. And covered. Keep back your servant and let them not. Because they will be jizz covered. And con, K backwards. L followed by the A, it's an N. Con is the priest. The jizz covered. And a conum cell of is, backwards, I-Z is. And am ism too. I-A reading is a vav, a U. Gameized them size. My jizz covered con. Cell of ism too. A winky time pusher in. The winky time, get you some winks. Time to go to bed. The winky time pusher in. And here you see this word. This is the same word, it's backwards as they says. And God said, let there be, and there was. But it's backwards. But that's why it's like that, because you're going to read it when you hit the mark. And the I-E reads the A. And the I before Vav reads as a N. And this is on here. And on will erection. And then backwards, the natural way. The natural way. Real is a suffix meaning that person that does that. The one who is. A waste and a wasteril is the one who is waste. A ill is the one who is the real. And so this is on will erection. Erection is stiffy. That's where they're getting this upright from in the wrong place. But the erection and a nuts rail and the natural way. Those type of people, the way of the nuts. But this is actually where the word inaugurate comes from. And you don't see it, and it lets me know that the people that was writing Psalm 19, they knew the more ancient language. And what it is, this chi here. In the more ancient language, this chi read as a G. And you see it's on will rex and and back, inaugural way, the inauguration. And it comes from a much older Semitic language. And it was the form of GR, and it's the chi. And it was the old X. It represents a plant growing, a little sprout coming out of the ground. And that's what the X represents, is the plant. And they call it the chi. But back in the day, it was the G, the gur. And it represents the crotch, where to plant the seed. And that's why it's a chi, as in a CH, the crotch, and also a GR. It's the ancient symbol of the chi row, which in the Hebrew, they're defined often as your enemy. The whole book's about battles, and that's what you want to do, is kill as much pussy as you can. And this would be the old row sign. That's the chi row. And being she holds two of them, it's no longer a row, now it's a re. That's the cherry, Virgo. And that's why in the Latin they say Rex is the king, but everybody else was saying Reg, regal. The root reg comes from the Latin word rex. So every time I run into an X word now, I'm going to put a G in there and see how it fits. And I'll come back to this and see what letters it's sandwiched between. And maybe I'll figure out exactly what caused it to read differently. But they erased all that in the Latin, and they just have everything reading the same. So before you're accepted, you're going to go through the on will erects an inaugural way. And when you're not reading that, it's just on will erection rape. And it's a R-I and then an I. So a double I is reading as a R-A-I-P. And then the I before the vav becomes an N. And it's a rape. And a raping. And a wedging. W-G and then the I before the vav again. And it's a wedging when. Level, L-V-I-L, a level pink of its wear, the level pink of its wear, and a new, the I followed by the vav reads the N, the new gal, G-A-L-L. If there was a Y here, you would actually spell it with two L's, and unless the second one's a Y. It makes me think that if you end a word with a Y behind a single consonant, it means that's a double letter. And on, I-E is A. On will Rex. On will King. An inaugural way. And this A word reading the other way. And it's her a mappin. M-A-P-N. So, this is the ancient Egyptian alchemy. And everything was related. And so even though it does appear to be talking about the stars when it starts here. It goes right on in to show, as above, it's so below. And I wasn't going to do this movie, but the main reason I did this, I ran into this other day when reading something from a minister or what. And so I clicked on that word, and I took a screenshot of this and saved it so I would remember to come back and read this. And you can see it here, and it was just the other day that Bible Hub used to be easier to use. They used to try to help you, and the word that was in the dark black here, they would show you the different Bibles and how they translate it. Of hidden, thou me from secret, me of hidden, the minister what. And I've been having troubles with my Bible Hub. A couple weeks ago it started. It lasted for a while. And this is what they were doing. Bible Hub was making it more difficult to use. And I think it's because of me. Because I'm figuring out how to read this. They never want anybody to be able to read this. Why would they go through all the trouble? It took some work to change their system and remove all the reds. And there's other things they did to make the system harder to use. They never wanted people to learn how to read the Hebrew or the Greek. They damn sure made it more difficult to try to figure out now. The hidden, the secret. So Bible Hub is part of the ministry. The ministry of hidden, of secret. Who discern of the hidden. They try to make it more difficult for who to discern of the hidden. But I've read this whole thing, this Psalms 19 here both ways, and that's definitely what it's talking about, is how the high priest used to take advantage of the kids. I was telling you about that flaming homosexual black dude from Atlanta, and I watched his video one time, and I couldn't watch it all, he was so flaming. And he was talking about how he had gone to Egypt, and he got initiated, and they put him on the table and all gang banged him. And I thought he was just an idiot that got gang banged and they was laughing, but no, that's what it's all about. If you want to get initiated, they're going to strap you on the table. It's going to be a smash to smash them. And you're going to be of a fix the table from lamb. That's where you are. You're tied on the table to smash them, to easel in them, so you can't move. And that as the bridegroom coming out of his chamber rejoices as a strong man to run a race. The vav followed by the aleph becomes the D or the T. It's the wed, The wet of cotton, it's so much put. Wisey sack and giver. The sack giver rejoices a strong man. Wisey sack giver, lure what's share. And I'm gonna cut this off here. Good day.